Welcome to HH28, where we unravel the secrets of self-discovery and matchmaking. We are Hugh and Heather,
two master holistic guides dedicated to helping you navigate the worlds of numerology, astrology, and personality in pursuit of meaningful connections.
All right, so are you ready to dive into the world of Aries?
I am so ready.
Whether you're an Aries yourself or just trying to figure out how to deal with those fiery personalities in your life, this deep dive is going to be good.
Definitely.
Yeah, so we can really get into like more than just Aries as a ram, right?
Absolutely. We can go way beyond those basic descriptions you usually hear. So to really get a grasp on Aries, we got to start with the foundation.
Okay.
Aries is a cardinal fire sign.
Okay, so full disclosure, even for someone like me who loves all this astrology stuff, cardinal fire still sounds kind of intense.
Yeah.
Can you break that down a little?
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Like,
But
I feel like I need like a fire extinguisher just hearing those words.
it can sound a little intimidating. Yeah.
So think of cardinal signs as like the initiators of the zodiac. You know, it's spring, new beginnings, a burst of energy.
Ooh, I like that.
That's where Aries comes in, always ready to charge ahead. And then you combine that with that element of fire.
Yeah.
All that passion, energy, creativity.
Okay.
It's a potent mix.
So like the first spark that ignites a fire.
Yes.
Like Aries really sets things in motion.
Exactly. One of the sources even calls them the, quote, trailblazers of the zodiac, driven by a desire to lead, explore, and conquer new territory.
I love that.
That drive to take action.
Yeah.
That's pure Aries.
Speaking of taking action, I have to admit, as someone who may or may not have bought concert tickets very impulsively because of that very Aries trait, it definitely resonates. Have you ever done anything like that?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
It's definitely a relatable quality.
Right.
And it connects right back to Aries being ruled by Mars.
Yeah. Oh, Mars, the planet of war. So does that mean that all Aries are just like ready to pick a fight at any moment?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, Mars does represent assertiveness and, yeah, sometimes even aggression.
Sure.
But it's also about that raw energy, you know, that drive to really go after what you want.
Okay.
It's that Martian energy that makes them such natural risk takers because they often just act on gut instinct.
So that whole do now, think later thing, it's like they're really trusting their gut.
Precisely. While that can definitely lead to some impulsive decisions,
Yeah.
that same fearlessness also helps them bounce back from setbacks.
Oh,
They're not ones to dwell on things. They're always looking ahead to that next challenge.
that's a good quality.
Yeah, and honestly, it's something we can all admire even if we're not in Aries.
Totally. I love that. Now, I am curious to know how this like fiery instinctual energy that we've been talking about, how does that play out in relationships? Because this compatibility chart is really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like Aries and Leo could be a really dynamic duo.
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, those two together can light up a room.
Oh, wow.
You get two fire signs, both super passionate, energetic, always ready for an adventure.
I feel like that much fire, though, could also lead to some pretty epic clashes, right? Like who's in charge?
Right. Definitely something to consider. You've got two strong personalities. Like, there's always potential for some power struggles.
For sure.
But the upside is that both Leo and Aries really get each other's need for attention, for excitement, for being in the spotlight.
So like a little healthy competition can actually be a good thing.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance, right?
Right.
And as long as there's mutual respect and admiration, those sparks can be pretty exhilarating.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Makes sense. Now, what about Sagittarius?
Okay. Yeah.
The chart says they're great adventure buddies, always down to try new things.
Oh, yeah. Sagittarius and Aries are two peas in a pod when it comes to pushing those boundaries and exploring. You put those two together, they'd be off on a spontaneous road trip in a heartbeat.
Oh my gosh.
Probably with a questionable plan and a lot of laughter along the way.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Right.
But the chart also mentions that they might need to work on emotional depth.
Yeah, that's an important point to consider because both of these signs are incredibly independent.
Right.
They value their freedom.
Okay.
And while that's amazing for, you know, exploring the world, it can sometimes come at the expense of really nurturing those deep emotional connections.
So it's not that they can't be emotionally available, it's just that they might have to put in a little extra effort in that area.
Exactly. And honestly, in relationships, who couldn't use a little more of that?
So true. That is a really good point. Okay, so then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got those pairings that might take a little more, I don't know, navigation.
Yeah, that's
Aries and Taurus, for example.
the classic opposites attract. But can they really make it work long-term.
Right?
It can be a bit of a roller coaster ride.
Well, because you've got the ram always charging ahead at full speed.
And the bull, steady, grounded, taking their sweet time.
Oh, yeah, I can already see some headbutting happening there. So what does the chart say about this dynamic?
Well, it specifically says that Aries' fast pace and Taurus's slow, steady approach can lead to frustration in love.
It's like trying to mix oil and water.
A very fitting analogy. Aries might see Taurus as too slow, too stubborn, too stuck in their ways, while Taurus might view Aries as impulsive, impatient, maybe a little reckless.
So it sounds like a recipe for disaster. Are Aries and Taurus just doomed from the start?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
But it would definitely take a lot of understanding,
Yeah.
a lot of compromise, a willingness to really appreciate those fundamental differences.
So maybe not the easiest pairing, but I feel like for some people, the challenge is part of the appeal. Because you know what they say, opposites attract.
There's no denying that.
Right.
But before we get too caught up in romantic entanglements,
Okay.
let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. What are some of Aries' strengths and weaknesses in general?
Okay, so we've touched on a few already, but what really stood out to you?
Well, when I think about those positive Aries traits, courage, optimism, and that sense of adventure are what come to mind immediately.
Yeah.
These are the people who inspire us to dream big and to take risks and to never give up on what we want.
They just have this like infectious zest for life.
Totally.
You're right. They make you want to be bolder, be more spontaneous, a little less afraid to just go for it.
That's that Aries spirit,
Yeah.
always pushing boundaries and encouraging those around them to do the same.
Yeah.
But of course, no sign is perfect, right?
Great.
And all that energy can sometimes manifest in not so ideal ways.
Right.
Like that whole act first, think later thing we were talking about.
Right, that double-edged sword. So besides being impulsive, what are some of those challenges that can come with that fiery Aries spirit?
Well, one that we can't ignore is the infamous Aries temper.
Oh, yeah. You can't talk about Aries without talking about the temper. Like, it's legendary. What is it about this sign that makes them so quick to ignite?
It really goes back to that Martian energy.
Oh, okay.
You just feel things so intensely, and that includes frustration.
Yeah.
So when an Aries feels like they're being held back or challenged in any way, that fire can flare up pretty quickly.
So it's not necessarily that they're like trying to be mean-spirited. It's just more of like an in-the-moment intensity thing.
Exactly. They're reacting to what they're feeling in that moment.
Right.
And the good news is, just as quickly as that anger flares up, it usually dissipates just as fast. They're not known for holding grudges.
Okay, that's good to know. So what's like the best way to deal with an angry Aries? Like, do you just give them space?
I mean, a little space never hurts.
Right.
It gives them time to cool off. And trust me, they will be back to their usual enthusiastic selves before you know it.
That actually reminds me of something else that said that Aries are quick to forgive after a disagreement.
Absolutely. And it's honestly one of their most endearing qualities. They just don't dwell on negativity. They don't harbor resentment.
That's great.
They would much rather just move on and get back to enjoying life.
Oh, I love that. That's definitely a trait we could all learn a thing or two from.
Right.
Okay, so we've got courage, we've got boundless energy, but then we've also got the impulsivity and a bit of a temper. It sounds like navigating Aries is all about finding that balance.
You hit the nail on the head. It's all about balance.
Yeah.
Quote, one of the major life lessons for Aries is learning to balance their desire for independence with the need for collaboration.
Because as much as they might not want to admit it, they can't always do everything themselves, right?
Exactly. As independent as they are, even Aries need to learn to rely on other people sometimes.
For sure.
So it's about them finding that sweet spot between their need for autonomy and knowing when to actually ask for help. And that goes for their personal lives and their careers.
Makes you wonder if that whole struggle with collaboration goes back to their ruling planet, too.
Interesting.
Because, I mean, Mars isn't really known for being a team player, right?
That's a good point. And it really makes you think about these planetary influences. They can offer some really fascinating insight into why we are the way we are.
Speaking of fascinating insights, there was this other little tidbit that said that Aries rules the head.
Oh, interesting.
And I gotta say, like with some of the Aries that I know, headstrong really comes to mind.
I see what you did there. But it's really interesting when you think about it.
Right.
Aries is associated with the head, the brain, the face, really the whole area.
So it's not just a metaphor. Like their energy is literally manifesting in that part of the body.
It's certainly something to consider. And the source even mentions that Aries individuals might be more susceptible to headaches or migraines, even eye issues or other things going on with their face.
Oh, wow. I never would have made that connection. But it makes sense. Like, all that energy has to go somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
And if that energy is bottled up or not being expressed in a healthy way, it could manifest physically.
Yeah.
It's just a good reminder that we're not just our minds or our bodies. We're this complex interplay of both.
It really makes you think about that mind-body connection, doesn't it?
It does.
And while we're on the topic of, Aries and how they kind of put themselves out there, I'm curious about something. We've talked a lot about how Aries interact with other signs, especially in terms of romantic compatibility. But what about how other signs experience that Aries energy?
That's a great question. Because you're right. Whether or not you have Aries prominently placed in your birth chart, we all encounter that Aries archetype in our lives.
Right.
So it's not just about if you're an Aries, it's about like the Aries in your life. So think about the people in your life who embody those Aries traits.
Okay.
That drive, that confidence, maybe even a little bit of that impulsiveness that we were talking about. How do they challenge you? How do they inspire you?
Like that friend who can convince you to do anything on a whim.
Yes, exactly. That's Aries energy in action.
Yeah.
And recognizing it, whether it's in ourselves or other people, can be so valuable.
Oh, for sure.
It's like having a secret decoder ring to understanding human behavior.
Right. It's like understanding those motivations and tendencies of different signs can really give you a whole new perspective on your relationships, even just like beyond romantic ones.
Totally. And speaking of relationships, I think we should probably circle back to that compatibility chart.
Okay.
We talked about the most compatible signs for Aries and also the most challenging ones.
Yeah.
But what about those ones that are kind of in between? The ones that have potential to be really great, maybe with a little effort.
The good matches. I like it. So which signs fall into that category for Aries?
Well, one that I think is really interesting is Aquarius.
Okay.
You've got two very independent signs, both with this love for innovation and pushing boundaries.
It seems like it could go either way, right? A match made in heaven or...
Right. While they have a lot of common ground, their approaches to life can be pretty different.
Oh, okay.
The chart even highlights how Aries is all about immediate action, diving headfirst into new experiences.
Yeah.
While Aquarius tends to be more detached and more strategic in their approach.
So Aries is like, let's launch the rocket.
Yeah.
And Aquarius is still like calculating the trajectory.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right.
And that difference in pace can definitely create some tension.
Oh, yeah.
Aries might find Aquarius too hesitant or unemotional. And Aquarius might see Aries as, impulsive or lacking follow-through.
Almost like a too much of a good thing kind of situation.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, with understanding and a willingness to compromise, those differences can actually become strengths.
Okay. I like that.
So Aries can help Aquarius loosen up a little bit, maybe take a few more risks.
Right.
And Aquarius can teach Aries the value of patience and planning.
So it all circles back to balance again. It's like with everything else we've been talking about.
You got it. Balance is key.
So even with those good matches, it sounds like communication and compromise are still super important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Astrology can give us some helpful clues about relationships and how those dynamics might play out.
All right.
But ultimately, it's really up to the two people involved to make it work.
That's so true. Okay, so we've got Aquarius as a potentially awesome match for Aries. Any other signs fall into that good match category?
Libra is another one that I think is really interesting.
Okay.
Because they're positioned directly opposite Aries on the zodiac wheel.
Oh, opposites attract. We've been circling this idea like all episode.
It's a tale as old as time. But in the case of Aries and Libra, that opposition can actually create a really cool dynamic relationship.
Because you've got Aries, all action-oriented, always following their gut.
And then you've got Libra, all about harmony and balance and really thinking things through.
I can see how that could lead to some interesting moments.
Definitely. In fact, the compatibility chart even mentions how Aries might find Libra's indecisiveness a little frustrating.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense.
And Libra might be thrown off by Aries's more, shall we say, direct communication style.
Oh, yeah. They talk about a clash of approaches, but I guess that's where the learning happens, right?
Precisely. Opposites have this really unique way of teaching each other valuable lessons.
Okay.
Aries can learn from Libra about the importance of diplomacy, of maybe seeing different perspectives. And then on the flip side, Libra can really benefit from Aries' decisiveness and direct approach.
So it comes back to that idea of balance again.
Exactly.
It's all about appreciating the differences and finding ways to complement each other's strengths.
Exactly. And I think that's a great takeaway from our deep dive into Aries today. whether we're talking about romantic relationships or friendships or even just understanding our own, astrological blueprint.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing those different energies and learning how to work with them in a way that feels really authentic and empowering.
I love that. It's not about saying like one sign is better than the other or putting people in a box. It's self-awareness and, like you said, using those insights as tools for personal growth.
Yes. Couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we kind of wrap up our exploration of all things Aries today, what is like the one key takeaway that you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I would say remember that Aries energy is powerful stuff, whether it's your dominant sign or not. That pioneering spirit, that drive to initiate, to lead, to just blaze new trails.
Yeah.
It's something to be admired, and when it's channeled in a healthy way, can be incredibly inspiring.
And maybe a little contagious too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We could all use a little bit of that Aries fire in our lives.
I love it. Well said. So on that note, we will let all of you go forth and conquer your day with all of the enthusiasm and zest for life of a true Aries.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive, everybody.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep embracing all those, fascinating contradictions that make us who we are.